Hey guys, it's Laura and Mark with You Should Grow, and we are hanging out in our greenhouse. We have been working excitedly to get seeds started for this year, so I know everybody else is kind of in the same boat. And one thing I really wanted to talk about is fertilizing your seedlings and talking about using fertilizers and what are organic fertilizers. And I thought, who better to talk about this with me than this guy right here.
Hey, how are y'all? So, where do you want to start? What you want to talk about?
Well, the first thing I thought we would talk about is what we were talking about in the kitchen is the organic, like what makes things organic, and trying to like make the switch from maybe synthetic fertilizers to organic fertilizers, kind of what the differences are and why we choose one or the other. So we call synthetic because they're sort of created or made in a lab, and they're really just, like Mark said, like salts, like chemicals that they mix together, and so they get certain minerals in different proportions. So you can have it be, a lot of times you'll mix it up at home, it's in a like a powder form or something, and I mean, to me it looks unnatural. I was shocked to see like blue fertilizer. I was like, what in the world? That's a weird thing. But, the reason it works is because it's synthetically balanced to meet all the needs of the plants. So they just kind of bloom.
I mean, to me, it's like a baby formula versus a natural milk.
Right.
They just said, okay, what can we tell that the plant uses? And they try to give it all that stuff in a liquid form. And like I said, the stuff works.
Yeah, it totally works. And it's easy to get and it's cheap.
Yeah. So. We just don't like to go that route. I mean, and you can overdo it with organic. And not to say you still can't really kill it. No, you can overdo it with organic. But you'd really have to mess up big time. I mean, if you put fresh manure, a pile of fresh manure on something, you're still going to burn it up. But in a well-balanced organic setup, you can really amp things up to the point that if you were using synthetics, you would just burn all the plants to pieces by over-fertilizing them.
So over-fertilizing usually means too much nitrogen, right? I mean, I guess all of them, but
any of them, because you get an excess of one, then you're going to create an inability. There's no space left. I mean, that gets into the ionization and everything, but there's going to be no space left for some of those nutrients. So, yeah, if you overdo any one...
They're usually high in nitrogen, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's just what I think.
What you're familiar with burning stuff up is usually too much manure because it's a whole lot of nitrogen, and plants can't handle that.
Yeah. And even at low doses, so too much nitrogen can actually cause problems where the plant is growing really, really well, but it's not making that much fruit. And that's because there's too much nitrogen, and nitrogen is the growth. It's not a hormone. What am I trying to say?
You can go that way.
Yes. So nitrogen is what makes the plants, it stimulates them to grow big. And so people give it to their lawns because then it makes all the leaves grow big and green. And you give it to, it's good at like transplanting, like a young tomato. Nitrogen is good for boost of growth because you don't need it to make tomatoes right then. You just want it to grow. So nitrogen has its uses, but if you keep using nitrogen high fertilizer throughout the grow season, you might actually end up getting gorgeous plants and very few produce.
Yeah, and all of you, if you know folks that grow tomatoes, you'll hear them say it was a bad year or whatever for tomatoes. Had these huge, giant, beautiful plants and no tomatoes. Well, that wasn't necessarily the season. That was just,
Probably using too much nitrogen in the fertilizer. And it's hard because you're looking at it, seeing it be successful, but you're not really successful. You know what I mean? Like the plant is growing and it's beautiful, but it's not really,
I mean, what I tell folks, we've sold plants at market before and stuff, and in that case, I want to sell them a lush, healthy-looking plant. But when they come out and see some of ours, when we're getting ready to plant them in the ground, they've been pinched off, and they're tall and leggy because of the way we're going to plant them and all that stuff. It's like, what are you doing? And it's like, well, I'm trying to grow tomatoes. I was like, I want a healthy plant, but I'm more concerned with growing tomatoes. So we try to nurture the plant in a way that we get that blossom set. It'll put out the blossoms, it'll set the fruit, and it'll get going early. We can just deal with it in a different way. It's just a different goal.
Yeah.
But we're talking about tomatoes, you know. Leafy greens, it's...
Yeah, leafy green. Anything that's green.
Mm-hmm.
So, like lawns and, I guess, like lettuce makes sense. I never thought about that, but yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The other day, I made a video transplanting our pepper seedlings. They were a little bit older than seedlings, actually, but I made a video of transplanting them, and I talked a little bit about how we move them into a potting soil, like a really nutrient-rich potting soil, instead of fertilizing them. And I wrote an associated blog post about that, and I go into depth about why we do that instead of just fertilizing. But I thought we could talk about it here, too.
Okay.
So the first thing that Mark said when I brought this topic up to him was that he, you know, definitely we have some seedlings. Wait, where are those? Oh, they're inside the house. So we have some seedlings that are in 128 cell trays. So how big is that little cone of stuff that they grow in? Like a half inch?
Yeah, it's right here. This is a similar tray here.
So they're
across.
So they're growing and they're starting to turn like a he called it chartreuse, like a lime green color instead of a deep green color, and that was an indication that those guys needed some fertilizer. And I was like, yeah, but really, don't they just need to be transplanted because that space is so small for them? And we're talking about tomatoes as well.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to leave them in there, I mean, if you're busy like us, most people are busy nowadays, you know, you may not get to transplant exactly when you want to. So throwing out the quarter strength fertilize on them just to kind of tide them over.
And yeah, we are growing lots and lots of tomatoes so that we can select for certain ones. So we're looking for little tiny plants, or we're looking for not tiny plants, you know, whatever we're doing. So we need to grow a whole bunch of them out. And when we grew, kind of before we started breeding seriously, you kind of just grew all the tomatoes.
Yeah.
I mean, not literally all the tomatoes, but he would just pick things and just grow them just to see what happened. And then,
I mean, we were doing well, and it's not uncommon. There's plenty of tomato lovers out here that do this. Over 100 varieties a year there.
Yeah.
And every year.
1,500 plants, and that's when we were going to market, because what do you do? What do you do with all those tomatoes? Well, we sold them, and that was fun, but we kind of have shifted gears a little bit. So we're not really growing out for fruit. We're growing out to select for plants. And all of that is to say that because we need so many, we start them off tiny, and then we sort of like rotate them out.
Yeah.
So that we have our indoor space for bitty seedlings. And then as they get older, they move out to the greenhouse. Anyways, I'm rambling now.
I'm sorry. So
yeah.
That's what we do.
So I started some in one of my seed starting videos, actually like the seed starting video that I just made. I showed starting seeds in those little lettuce containers. And then in the transplanting video, I showed how I get those out of the, so they're in this container and all their roots are grown together. And so I showed how I get those out, how to do it in the most gentle way. So if you need those tips, go check that video out, because that will really help you. That's sort of my little sister she made up a word. She calls them a complicant. Something that complicates something. So that's a complicant. And so I talk a little bit about the solutions. But point is, Carly, the point is that we all start in a little container and we have to move them up to a bigger container. If you don't do that and they get really stressed, you can fertilize them, but they need more space. Their roots are going to get all wrapped around, and that's not good for them, and that'll stunt their growth in the long run.
Yeah, on the other extreme, people say, hey, why can't I just plant straight out? Why can't I just plant seeds in the pot? There's several reasons, but I guess one of the big things is if you want 50 tomato plants, healthy, good ones, do you really want to be having 50 giant pots out there, and then what if they fail? I mean, it's much easier to plant 100 and something and be able to cull them. It's going to cost you much less than 50 pots and having 2 or 3 of them fail completely.
So tomatoes, especially, and like peppers, if you don't get them started in advance, you're never going to get fruit off of them. So they take a really long time. So you have to get them started in advance, unless you live like in the tropics or something. But around here, and we have a really long growing season. We have had tomatoes sprout on their own and give us fruit.
Yes.
But and we live in the South, we live in Georgia. But, most people need that extra time. And those plants are never quite as healthy as the ones that we grow from seed this way.
Yeah, if you get them out late and they grow out, it's kind of tough to keep them healthy.
Yeah, because by the time they sprout, especially like here, they sprout naturally, and then it gets hot like that.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
And if it's been raining, the grass is always carrying some early blight around. So depending on where they come up, could be in bad shape right off the bat.
So, transplanting them starting them in something little. The other thing about starting them in little that we haven't talked about is that you can control the temperature and the moisture so much easier than you can if you're in something big. So if you're starting them in the 20-gallon container, they're just not going to come up as well. So you might have to plant, 5 seeds maybe per container, and then, I don't know. It's overwhelming for their roots too. So the other thing is when the roots come out, they need a little bit different kind of medium than the adult roots do. So you need something that's less dense for them, but they can't live in that the whole time. So I guess we just baby our plants. Maybe we just baby them.
I don't think we better.
But we
do love on them. I mean, we want them to be.
Yeah, and then we eat them. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
So that's the reason that you would want to transplant them instead of fertilizing, and you definitely wouldn't want to fertilize them and induce a growth spurt in a space that is too small. So you definitely don't want to do that. So I would say maybe seed starting. I hope everybody knows that transplanting is part of that.
Yeah. I mean, there's exceptions. There are things that do better. Direct sowing, but even there, some of the soil block people can have some amazing results with things that aren't supposed to be grown well from seed and transplanted. Like
I saw this guy on Instagram, he was growing beets. He was transplanting beets. And I was like, you said what? And then I saw he was using soil blocks, and I was like, that's...
Okra is one of the most impressive because we've done the soil block okra. And then done the later planted out in the field, and the soil block okra, just something with the tap root, I guess, the primary root, it just didn't do well. It topped out at 2 or 3 feet, whereas the others were 8 or 10 feet.
It was like the corn too.
Yeah, the corn was the same way.
Did not like, even in the soil block, did not like it. But we're trying, like this year, normally we do squash out, direct seed squash, and this year I have there's one of these trays. I started out with some squash just to see if I can get them a little bit older before the squash bugs attack them, and see if I can get a better crop out of it. So something
worth a try, because everything looks pretty and everything's on and we're good, and then the invasion happens.
Oh yeah, it's like bam, squash bugs.
So you get prepared to have the too many zucchini problem, and then they all die.
Yeah.
All
plants. The plants they make fruit, but the fruit's like icky.
Yeah, the virus fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep.
Keep trying new stuff. And
but I'll also do some of the other, start just directly from seed.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I've done this every year for a lot of years now. I don't know. At least 10 doing it kind of this way. And every year I screw something up really big. And it's been that way as long as I can remember. So those of you who don't do any gardening, trust me, the screwing up's part of it. So if your seedlings die again, don't just huff and puff. Just start some more. Things are going to die. Things are going to happen. And only thing that changes is the scale of the mess up, I guess.
Yeah.
But my point is just keep learning. And every year, you're either stuck in old ways if you're not failing something. We always like to try new stuff, and as a result, it doesn't always work well.
But you learn. Just like anything else, you learn. And, I think sometimes even if you know that something's not going to work, you have to do it yourself. Are you that way? It's like
there are some things that when I find it works, I just stick with it. But we always try something new. Whether it be different timing on fertilize or a different spray regimen. If we had a big problem with something last year, we try to deter it this year preventatively as much as possible.
All right, so that's all we have today. This is Mark and Laura with You Should Grow, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. So fertilizing your seedlings.
Yes.
Yeah, so I recently...
Oh, we're still talking about it? We're back to that. Okay. Anyway.
So I will... You threw me off.
Sorry, talking about fertilizing seedlings.
Yeah.
Those little plants with plant seeds.
Yeah. So... You quit interrupting me. So... now I just can't do it.
We like weird, different garden shirts that help us identify other people that like to garden or people that are interested in gardening, because you get a weird shirt, it's going to strike up a conversation. This one, the most odd conversation, or I guess uncomfortable conversation I had, we were going through TSA checkpoint, security checkpoint in the airport, and where were we going to?
I think we were going to New Jersey that time.
Oh yeah. So we were headed to Jersey, flying out of Atlanta, and yeah, he kind of looked at me, and they had our ID, and we were there with the kids and the whole 9 yards, all dressed in that, smiling, ready to go, and Gardner died. And he just kind of looked at me and funny. I thought, uh-oh.
He's like, what does that mean?
Yeah, he's like, what does that mean? You know, I was like, oh no.
So we were like, did we just say bomb in the airport?
I know, because he was just giving me the sideways look, and I was like...
Did not even think about it, like, not at all.
No, I was like, that's just kind of what we do. We like to garden, and you had a garden shirt on. What was it? It wasn't
threatening.
No, it was like garden therapy or...
Yeah, maybe.
Shirt.
It was, I think that was the thing.
It was the garden therapy
it's
shirt.
Like, totally opposite.
Thank goodness, because it's like, added some legit... I was like, it's just the gardening, just encouraging people to embrace life and learn where stuff comes from, and learn where the plants that they eat come from, and just really understanding growth. Not really having anything to do with somebody dying of any toxic, anyway.
Yeah,
well, this kind
I think
of a
he was
toxic
like,
thing, but yeah.
He like watched you all the way.
Yeah, I was like, it's just a garden thing. It's just kind of what we do. So it was a nervous few minutes because
Like never ever would have
at
thought.
the airport or anywhere else for that matter, you don't paint outside the lines very much, especially at a security checkpoint. So didn't mean to cause a security scare there, but
it was funny.
It was effective at striking up
really
a conversation, just like it was intended to. So it worked.
It did. That's kind of true.
Yeah.
There's no gardens, there's no food.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you could still eat cows.
Not. Well, we won't go there.
Anyway.
If they're still around a few years.
Those farting cows.